Hello and welcome on this screencast about how to find heap and get parent in JavaScript nested objects with recursive functions and the reference concept. It's intended for JavaScript beginners. Working with nested objects is frequent in JavaScript, so I made this screencast around this question. But the goal here is to help JavaScript beginners to understand how to build a simple recursive function and to get a better intuition about the reference system in JavaScript. The full text contents is in the blog post, and you have also a fiddle to play with the code and see in action. The first recursive function we are going to build will display a hierarchy. But before, we need a few datas. Let's build a data object that represents the hierarchy you want to display in a tree. In a real-life project, this will be generated from an external JSON you've loaded. So, I'm copy-pasting an object containing an array of objects containing themselves other arrays. Here it is. You see an object, an array containing objects, themselves containing other arrays, themselves containing objects and arrays, and so on and so on. Now let's build a function. So the general idea is to make a function build tree that will take the data as the tree array as parameter, and for each item in this array it will add an element to the DOM based on the item name property. In the same time, the loop will test the object to see if it has a tree array property, and if there is one, it will call itself again and pass the new funded array as parameter. So let's type it. Add a comma. Build tree function. So the function is var build tree equals function. So it's a parameter which is a tree, open and close brackets, semicolon. Now underscore each. For each element of the tree we have a callback with an item as a parameter. Okay, so now we are going to add to the document the name of the object. Document dot body dot inner HTML plus equals item dot name, and if there is a tree object in the item, we recall the function. So if item dot tree build tree on the item dot tree as a parameter. What do I do? Oops. Okay, and now we have to call the function with datas dot tree for first parameters and run it. There's one thing you may not be familiar with in this function, the underscore syntax. It's not vanilla JavaScript. This is a function provided by a wonderful library, _JS. Actually, in my everyday project I use Lodash, but they share the same API. As said on the website, this is a utility-built library for JavaScript. It provides almost 100 functions that, in my opinion, should be native in JavaScript. If you don't know or don't use it, you should really give it a try. The syntax is straightforward, the library is light, there are many functions like find word, debounce, memoize, isNumbers, and so on, that you will end up writing by yourself, but way less optimized. And the basic functions like each are way more intuitive and easy to use than the native for loop or for each loop that we have in JavaScript. Plus, if you have some time, go read the development source code with all its comments. Some parts are genius and you will learn a lot, I promise. That's here. So back to the code. As you can see, the elements are displayed, but this is not really interesting. So let's improve the code to actually display a hierarchy. At first, we need to add a container where we will put our elements. Div ID equals container. That's it. And now in the code we will not only add the text, we will add a container with a text node to a parent container and pass this new container as a parameter to the function. We need first to add the first container, which will be $div ID container. This is a jQuery function, and of course 0, because we need to target the element. And now for each item of each tree, we are going to create a new container, or new container equals documents dot create elements with a div tag, and for name text equals documents dot create text node, I think, with item dot name as parameter, and new container dot append child name text. That's it. And now container, we are going to pass it as the parameter container dot append child new container, and we are going to pass the new container as parameter of the next call, new container. So, and now we run it. Okay, it's all displayed in a div. We don't see hierarchy because we have no set any CSS. So div. Let's add a padding left. Padding left, 10 pixels. Okay, let's run it. And here we are. We have a hierarchy. So it's our data's object displayed in its hierarchy, and each container is contained in its parent container. The next step is about updating the model. If you are not familiar with the use of the word model in a development context, think about it as the data's overview. So what if you want to update the name of, for example, the name5 object? Of course, the object is stored here, data.tree at index number 0 dot tree at index 2 dot tree at index 0. And this is a way to target it. But if you want to make an update after a user input, the only information you are going to get from the DOM is probably name5. So to target in the model, you will need to build a reference to that object. So let's add some buttons and click events. So the build with function won't add only these, but also buttons. So for button equals documents dot create elements. It's a tag button. Button dot ID equals item dot name. Button dot inner HTML equals item dot name, and new container dot add pen child button. Okay. So let's run it. So now we have buttons, and let's add some clicks. Click events. So on again a jQuery function, dollar div ID container dot on click only on the buttons, and the callback with the jQuery event as a parameter, and in the callback we will just alert e.target.id. Let's run it, and now we alert the ID of the target. Oh, ridiculous. Okay, sorry. We ID name1 and name5, for instance. Another small digression about a library, jQuery. The following explanation is only interesting for you if you barely know JavaScript and jQuery, otherwise you can skip it. So let's focus on the line div, on this line. This is a jQuery function. jQuery is a JavaScript library that will make your life easier to manipulate the DOM. To really master JavaScript, you should be able to make everything in raw.js in a targeted browser. But for a real-life project, you should always have a library like that to manipulate your DOM. Otherwise, the compatibility issues will literally ruin you. So, step-by-step exploration. The $div ID container returns an array of each div with the ID container in the DOM. Of course, it's an ID, so there should be only one. The on is a function to bind events to all the elements of the array. The click is obviously to bind a click event. The button is probably the most interesting thing here. It's to specify that we want to delegate the event. The event will not trigger when the div ID container is clicked, but when a button inside this div is clicked. This is really powerful because it allows us to add events to elements that does not already exist in the DOM. And finally, function. This is just a callback, called when the click occurs. And the parameters E is a jQuery event. Back to the code. Change the name or the ID of the clicked element in the DOM would be easy. If you do e.target.id or e.target.innerHTML, it will do the trick. But to change the name in the model of the page, i.e. the data's object, we have to find the reference to the subobject and modify the name property of this subobject. After that, we need to regenerate the content in the DOM. It may seem like a lot of work for nothing right now, but in more complex applications, this makes sense. To do so, we will make a getObject recursive function to find our object in the data's object. The idea here is to make a first call to our recursive function from the click event, and then pass the data's.tree array, the ID of the DOM object, and a callback as parameters. In the recursive function, we find our object, it calls the callback. To do so, we will make a getObject recursive function to find our object in the data's object. The idea here is to make a first call to our recursive function from the click event, then pass the data's.tree array, the ID of the DOM object, and a callback as parameters. If the recursive function finds our object, it calls the callback. If the item has a tree property, the function calls itself and passes this tree property as a parameter. So let's do the getObject function. The getObject function as a comment for getObject equals functions with 3 parameters: the container, the ID, and the callback. Open close bracket. So again, it's an each underscore dot each on the container, which will be at first data tree and after a tree, comma function. So on each item of the container, which are going to be the objects. If item dot name equals ID, we call back with item as a parameter, and if item dot tree gets object item dot tree ID and callback, and it's going to be else if to do it only if we did not find it. And now we have to update a little bit the click event to add the get object function. So get object, and we pass at first status dot tree e dot target dot ID and a function which will be the callback, and the callback is near the parameter which will be targets, which will be the object the get object function has to find. And now targets dot name equals we'll set the new name, and to make it unique we'll add a math.random function just to have a unique name. Now we empty the container, so div container that empty, it's a jQuery function again which just empties the div, and after we call back the build tree function as we called it the first time, and let's run it. When I click on the name, what I see is that it has changed the name in the model, because now we have a new name. When we regenerate the page, we have the new name. So that's it for everywhere, and if we add a little space there, it will be prettier. Okay, that's it. In the code I just wrote, you maybe saw something a bit shocking for beginner or non-JavaScript developer. That thing, a function as a parameter. WTF? Yes, you can, because you do not actually pass the function, you pass a reference to that function. So in the getObject function, the callback is a reference to that function. So when you call the function with the callback, what you do is actually tell the anonymous function in the call of the getObject, in the callback of the click event of a button in a container to run. You have to understand that, because it will define the execution context of your function, and this is a central matter in JavaScript. This is a bit harsh to understand, but you will understand it by using it. Let me try to clarify the way object references works in JavaScript. Variables are often explained to beginners as container where you can put values. In JavaScript, this is not always the way it works. This is easy to understand but hard to explain, so I'll try to give you an intuition by playing with a pair of variables and logging them in the console. So I open the console, and now let's try. For a equals 10, okay. For b equals a. Okay, now if I log a, I have 10, and b, I have 10 also. But what happens if I do a equals 5? If I log a, I have 5, and b, I have 10. Of course, everything seems normal. So let's try something else. If I do var a equals an object with the property name and the value name. Okay, and now I do var b equals a. If I log A, I have an object, and B, the same object. Now what happens if I do a.name equals new name? I have A object name new name and B object name new name. So when I made a change in A, it changes B, because B is not an object. B is a reference to an object. This is not a bug, this is not a problem, this is what you should expect, and this is powerful. In JavaScript, name, numbers, strings, booleans are passed as values. Objects, including functions, arrays, are passed as references, which means that if you pass an object as parameter of a function and update this parameter in your function, the original will be updated, not a copy. If you want to make a copy, you will have to clone the object. The third and last recursive function will get us the path of an object. At first, we add a small div to display the path of the object. So it's div id equals path, and that's it. To go further, we need to get the parent of the targeted object. In JavaScript, there is no clean and easy way to get the parent of a JS-nested object. When you are working with a DOM or with an XML, you can target the parent nodes, but if you try it with a JavaScript object, this won't do anything. Once again, this is not a bug or a weird JavaScript behavior, and let me explain the reason why this is not possible with the console again. So we have, let's say we have an object A equals, and with a property P1, which is itself an object, with a key value 1 and another sub-object P2 key value 2. Okay, so now I'm gonna make a B object for B equals a dot p1. If I try B, it's now key value 1. So the parent of a.p1 is obviously A, but what about the parent of B? B is a reference to a.p1. So what you want is the parent of B to be A, but B is obviously in the same level as an A. It would be, its parent would be something like document, which is really not an interesting information. So with a function get parent B that returns A, and that function does not natively exist. The way you do it is by leveraging the object reference system. When you build the hierarchy for each object, you add a reference to its parents. And what's convenient is that we have already a recursive function that goes through every object. So we just have to update that function to add an element parent for each item. It's going to be item.parents equals a parent object. And now we have to define this parent object. It will be obviously a parameter parent object, and that we have to pass in the first call. In the first call, the parent object is status, and after the parent object will have to be item, and don't forget to edit there. Status. You see that as I told you before, when you have item, it's a reference to an object, and when you add a property to that reference, you add a property to the original object not only the reference to the original object. So now if we would log the data object, we will see that it has been updated. So I'll do console.log datas and run it. Now I display the console and I see this is my data object, and when I go there I see that I have a parent object. So my tree, the first and second item of the tree array, have a parent object which is the tree, and you have a reference to itself in the parent object for each item of the tree. We are now set to build the path to the clicked object with the last recursive function. The idea is that if the target has a parent, it adds the parent name to the path and calls itself back with the updated path to the target parent, else it returns the path. So let's add a function, get path of an object. For get path equals function with a target and a path as parameters. So if the target as parent, so if target dot parent path equals, we update the path that has been passed as parameter, equals target dot parent dot name plus let's add a slash and the current path. Okay, and return get path get path target dot parent comma path. Else, if not parents, we return the path. Okay, so now we have to call that function from the click event, and the click event is here. So it's going to get the path and display it. That one is get the target object, and of course before we get the path we have to get the object, so it's in the callback. At first a jQuery function to get the reference to the path container, and another jQuery function which is HTML to set the content of the node, root slash plus get path with parameters target and an empty path to start with. So let's run it, and now we see name5 is root undefined. Why undefined? Name1, name5 is okay. Why undefined? When I build, oh, it's because of course it should be null. The first parent is always null, of course. Sorry, null. Okay, let's run it again, and name5 is correctly displayed name1, name4, and name4 is correctly root name1, and name1 is in the root. And now watch it, when I click that, which was name5, we have new name and the mass random, which means that we properly updated the model. We did not only updated the DOM content, but we also updated the model. If we only had update the DOM object, we will have still name1 and name4 here. But as we properly update, it's the right thing is that is displayed. So that's all, folks. I hope you learned something. To remind you, we had an object, nested object, and first a build tree to build a hierarchy in the DOM, and I erase it, it's useless, and click events to catch click on the buttons, and get object function to get the object in the model, and get path of an object to display the path. And when you click it, it displays the path and change the name. Thank you for your attention. I save it and will give it to you in the comments.